Suara Inspirasi,
where every voice tells a story.
and every story will inspire you.
Let's carry on our conversation on our second leg of our journey, and it's been quite interesting on our first leg. And Alin, go ahead.
So, you went from opening a South African, again, how many people actually take chains from South Africa? That's a big question, right? Not the usual American English brands, right?
Correct.
And then starting in Malaysia. How long was it from the moment you opened your first store in Telawi to the first store outside of Malaysia?
So 98, I opened in Malaysia. 2010, we opened in Singapore. And actually,
Wow.
we kept on saying that we wanted a franchise of Singapore. And this same mentor that I had, this partner, Mike, he says, Chung Lynn, don't. You have no clue how difficult it is to operate in Singapore. So he was very reluctant for us to open in Singapore. But when our competitors started opening there, Bachelos and some other brands, which were also South African peri-peri chickens, we thought we needed to go in to defend our brand.
Okay.
And so we finally did in 2010. But by then there was a group structure in Nando's. There was a lot more chat about how do you position yourself in Singapore, right? So there was a question of, do you sell alcohol or no alcohol? What's your positioning?
And
Where
you have kind of strategy and stuff like that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of debate about that because around the world, Nando sells alcohol. So there's wines and beers. They sell Portuguese wines and beers. And so, we had to really think what we wanted. So actually, we went in selling alcohol at the beginning.
Okay.
In Singapore?
In Singapore.
Oh, all right.
But actually, a few years after that, we did a whole strategy exercise and turn around, actually. I'll tell you about that in a second. And we actually took that off. I'll tell you about it later. Yeah.
Okay.
So scaling, yes. So Singapore was 2010. And even then, we had to make sure that our structure in Malaysia was enough and can cope with this extra different country. Because the one thing about Singapore is we always think of them as our nearby neighbors. It's the same. But actually, we all look the same, but the mindset is completely, completely different.
Yeah.
So I might as well tell you the story about what happened in Singapore.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in Singapore, what happened was when we first opened, our first restaurant was in Bugis, and our next two outlets were along the Orchard Road belt. So the strategy was basically to hit the early adopters, people who had traveled the world and who already knew the brand. Right. So by doing that, you help yourself. You don't have to spend so much time in educating what Nando's was.
Okay.
And then it was crazy. Typical Singapore, any new brand that goes in, you queue. We had queues. It was just madness, like 40 people deep for 3 months.
Wow.
It was,
Really?
I think we made back our money in the first restaurant within I think 3 to 6 months.
That's
It was
insane.
really short. It was really, really
Yeah,
crazy.
but when you
Feedback.
compare it to what you were saying earlier, right? When your mentor was telling you when you want to open up Singapore, he was really discouraging. He was saying it's going to be difficult and all that. Did you actually face something like that? And
We did.
talking about what you do, maybe you could explain about those.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
did you actually face, and what you went through?
So the first three were really good. Good, decent restaurants. And even to this day, they do very well. It was once we left the Orchard Road belt and started going into the heartland.
Okay.
And it was like a completely different kettle of fish. So if you think about it, right? So the disparity in income group for Singaporeans between your expats, the people who work in banking, and then your everyday person living in the heartlands is huge. When you look at household incomes in all your heartlands, I'm actually surprised it's not borderline poverty. I think it's just that they have so much given by the government, hospital, medical, schools, everything's so good that everyone's very comfortable, but they're extremely, extremely tight when it comes to food and affordability.
Okay, this is something to a point to ponder, right? We always think Singapore is kind
but
of...
you think about it, you that's why all the old people have to work until they're like 70 years old. I've got 70-year-olds working in my restaurants in Singapore. They are so old, they can't even carry the grits off my grill. So they have to do certain things, but they can't do certain things. And this is what happens when you have to work until you're so old, right?
Okay.
But anyway, so what happened was, what we found was we were starting to lose money quite a lot. So your three restaurants in the Orchard Road belt, no problem. But all the rest of them, we were just not doing the same kind of sales that we were doing. And so we had to go in and do a strategic turnaround. We worked with group on this. They had a strategy team at that time. And we literally worked every single number. What was it? Is it pricing?
Mhm.
Is it the fact that you don't have enough people, or what was it? And in the end, what we worked out was in Malaysia, our rental is maybe 15% of sales. In Singapore, it's about 28 to 30%.
Oh, that's okay. That's
Your
huge.
labor in Malaysia, it's 18% of sales. In Singapore, again, it's anything from 20 to 25%. Everything is just that little bit more expensive. Chicken, for instance, in Singapore is, I think, the third highest, or was the highest in the world. But remember, they buy chicken from Malaysia, which was the cheapest chicken in the world. So someone actually did this analysis of price of chicken around the world. And so they bought the cheapest chicken from Malaysia, and somehow by the time they cut it and processed it and sold it to us, it was the most expensive chicken in the world. So it was just so ridiculous. So some of the things that we had to do, people could afford us. So when we did our analysis of competitor benchmarking pricing, people could afford us at lunch, at dinner, but at lunchtime they didn't want to spend more than $10. They said they wanted it cheap, okay? But at dinner time, they were willing to spend lots of money, and money was not an issue. So we had to look at pricing. So we did a pricing analysis, and we had to look at the elasticity. If we were to drop it, what was the cannibalization and all this kind of thing. So we did that. So in the end, we did drop our pricing by about $1 for each of the two key main products.
This is only for
Singapore.
The whole Orchard Road, or just the
I'm trying
rest?
to think. At one point, it was the whole country, and then slowly we brought up Orchard Road area
Okay,
again.
yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I just want to
Yeah, it
know
was
about the
differential.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And then labor, we had to relook at the labor, how we brought people in, what was the salary. Because, oh yes, I remember what we did. Our GM at that time kept on saying that we weren't paying people enough. And look at this, everybody was increasing their salary. And literally every month, he was showing us another one where somebody was increasing their salary. And it was just getting to the point where we just couldn't afford
it,
to even run it anymore, right? So we did bring in a new GM. She was ex-HR and ops for the Pizza Hut KFC. And she restructured a whole load of things. I've just realized, I've done the strategic turnaround in Singapore twice now. Singapore is a hard one to do. So we dropped pricing, we changed the labor structure. That round, we did not change it to hosted cockerel yet. That time, we just ran it as
table dining. Yeah.
dining. The next round, we decided that we were becoming too frumpy as a brand. So all the Singaporeans wanted hip happening type places, IG type, photographs and all that thing. So we needed to look at our restaurant design, spruce it up with a bit more color. We decided to go hosted cocktail to make it a bit younger. The condiment station became a bit more of a key point. It was just livening up the energy and all that. But the pricing strategy was a big part in working that. Yeah, so we've done turnarounds quite a few times in Singapore. It's amazing how they're so close, but they're so different from Malaysia.
So eventually, your mentor was actually right. Is that how you the things that you do to turn it around?
We grew to 11 at one point in Singapore. We're now down to 6. We have no urges to grow unless the right site comes along.
Okay. I think you'll be more cautious now because of all the cycles they've gone through.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it to try out anymore. It's not a trial period kind of stuff, right? So
the other thing we also learned through this process was, at one point they wanted a standard size for Nando's all around the world. So they started encouraging us to grow 2,005 to 3,000. And this was the UK model. But what they didn't realize that actually one model doesn't fit everybody around the world, right? So in Singapore, where the per square foot cost was so expensive, we were opening 3,000, 3,500 square feet sites. And so even before you started, the rental was already going to kill you.
Yeah. You were saying, right, it's like 28%,
Yeah.
30%. It's kind of crazy.
It's huge. So what we're doing now is we're trying to get an optimal size. And in fact, Malaysia now, we're looking at our size of our footprint.
Okay.
So this is something that we're at that 76, 80 kind of restaurant size in Malaysia now. And in order to go bigger, to go to that 100 to 200 restaurants,
Okay.
we need to look at our model. We
see.
can't be building the same footprint. We're in all the top major shopping centers already, right?
Okay.
So where else can you go next? And so we're starting to look at smaller ones. So we opened one in Eco Churas for about 1,800 square foot.
Okay.
60 to 70 seater. The average spend is a lot less as well. So we're starting to look at those kind of footprints.
Okay, so it's kind of and it's also, it definitely affects your overall strategy as well. But how does this smaller shops, and in terms of numbers and business, how is it doing? Because sometimes
It's actually quite good, actually.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I might expect, a turnaround time, and you're catering different mindset of people, different groups of people. So small, fast, come in, come out kind of stuff, right?
So you're going more towards the neighborhood malls now,
Yes.
the B grades and the not so in your face type bigger
Correct.
shopping centers, right?
Correct.
The other thing we're also looking at is, for years everyone only knew the shop lot model.
Yeah.
But when was the last time you popped into a shop lot to eat?
Yep.
It's impossible to
Right.
park.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're
And
right.
So none of our shop lots, and we've been trying to crack that model for years, and every time we close it.
Okay.
Because people just don't go. So during COVID, we did well
Okay.
because there was delivery.
Delivery.
But then the moment COVID ended, it's back down again. So now we're starting to explore the standalone, not drive-throughs, but in all those kind of,
Okay.
the
Kind
big
of a central kind of, yeah.
it's like a standalone unit type.
Yeah.
But ideally with other competitors around.
Correct.
So we got one in Eco Grando that we trialed. So there's a Jaya Grocers.
Right.
There's other competitors around us. There's a Starbucks
Starbucks,
drive-through and things like that. We don't bother with the drive-through. We're not quite ready for that.
Okay. And
But-
how many do you have like this standalone kind of stuff? One.
We're currently looking at a second one.
Okay.
I
I think
the Desa Water
that
Park.
works, but of course you got to see the traffic at that point of time.
Yes.
How do you drive traffic there? And of course parking is a big essential.
Parking is a big essential
Yeah.
part. So those ones all have parking.
Correct. Excellent.
And actually, if you look now, all like the Starbucks and all of that,
Even the McDonald's.
And the McDonald's, they are
have
going
quite a
that
lot.
direction now.
Exactly.
yes.
I mean, they're also going the petrol station model, which I think some of them are stepping back, right? Like even Costa's moving up. Nando's never looked at the petrol station model because
In South Africa, I believe they have some.
Oh,
We just don't do it
I think
because
the
I
menu
think
probably doesn't.
it was also gas. I remember I did ask when I first started. It was also because we have gas and fire and
because of
all
the
that.
fact
It
that
was
the
like,
grid-
yeah.
Oh,
So it was a
yeah.
safety thing as well.
So you probably got to change the entire
Yes.
staff or menu.
It'll probably have to be electric
Electric grill,
grills and
yeah.
things like that.
And you'll just.
Yeah.
Things
So
different.
so it's not a priority for us at this stage.
Right.
We've learned over the years. I mean, in the early days, we even had the Tesco's.
Yep.
Yeah.
But think about it. If you go shopping in one of those hypermarkets, you're exhausted by the time.
Yep. You're in and out. You don't want to
You're
spend
in and
time
out.
there.
You got.
You just want to get your shopping into the car and leave. I mean, there's no time to go and sit down and eat or anything like that. So we learned the hard way in some of
Correct.
this.
Right. And Tesco's and all that used to have all this, in the beginning it was all, oh, you're going to have that kind of traffic, but you don't see those numbers trickling down to the restaurants, right?
Yeah.
So because you're right, the mindset of people, I want to go in, buy my sundry goods, and I'm going to go out.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, you want to be a place where people go to chill, people go to do their stuff and, have, while not going out.
And then eat at the same
Correct.
time. Eating is part of the
Exactly.
trip
And
out.
in
Yeah.
Malaysia, mall culture is mall culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've gone from being the founding CEO at the beginning of 1998 to then stepping back in the mid 2000s, right?
Yeah, probably around 2013, yes.
Yep. So what made you decide to say, look, I've done my tour of duty. I'm ready to take a step back and hire someone else to do the CEO role that you've been holding for at that time? What was that? Do the math. 15 years?
Yeah, so I think, look, we're a JV structure. So it got to a stage where they were doing a management assessment around the world
Okay.
on all the different heads of countries as such. And it got to a stage where we decided that maybe the company would do better with a professional CEO. I mean, at the end of it, remember, I was an architect coming to an entrepreneur. I've always been very good about hiring better people than me. I think that's a big, big part. I mean, what did I know about marketing? So I got, a really good marketing person who knew how to write marketing plans and she drove Nando's marketing to a different level, right?
Yeah.
So just putting all the right people in place. And I think it got to a stage at one point where it was time for me to step back.
Okay.
And that's when I decided to step back. I was quite tired as well.
Was it your own decision?
It wasn't. It was and it wasn't.
Okay.
Okay. So
This
they
is
were.
the interesting part I want to hear.
Yeah. So they did a management assessment around. So it was the first ever group CEO, and in the Nando's group. And all these years, the owners had put their friends, cousins, whatever, in heads of countries, right? So they've grown the business to a certain level, but they wanted to bring it to another level and professionalize the business, corporatize the business. So this guy did a management assessment of every single person around the world. Luckily for me, I came out very well in my management assessment and actually rated amongst the top 2,000 CEOs around the world, and being rated platinum level. So I kind of thought, ooh, I've got nothing else to prove. I'm okay to step back. I had sacrificed a lot of time with my family.
Obviously, I guess.
It was
I would imagine.
It was just madness. I was nonstop working. At that time, I traveled quite a lot, and my kids were growing up. So I thought, it was a good time. And I was actually quite tired. The restaurant industry is a nagging industry. It's always about just driving consistency in your restaurant, right? So you go and eat the chicken, or you comment about service or cleanliness. It's always one of the three things that you're
Correct.
always focusing on. And I was a bit tired, I think, at that stage. So, I had my justification that I was good enough as a CEO. I've already done quite well. I built the business to about 50 restaurants at that point. But in order to bring it to that next level, I thought it was time that I stepped back. And that's what I did. And that's when we put our first professional CEO in place,
Okay, and what year was that?
2013.
Okay.
How long did it take for you to find the CEO?
I can't remember. I think it was probably about a year.
A year.
Wow.
Wow.
Because I wasn't sure, right? When you're stepping back for the first time, you're not quite sure what you want. And also coupled with the fact that we're a JV structure, we had to marry somebody that would be able to report into group as well as manage us as shareholders. So they always have two bosses. So that's something that it took some time to understand what we wanted.
What were the key, must-haves at that point in time? Because you ran the ship yourself, mainly as CEO since the beginning, and now you're about to hand over the reins to somebody that's going to be.
What were the qualities you're
what were the
looking for?
core qualities you needed to say, look, I'm happy to have this person. I guess a year is also partly because you wanted to refine that even further, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I think the
what were
key
you
one.
looking for,
I think the key one was it had to be somebody who understood culture. So the Nando's culture is a very, very key, distinct part of Nando's, right?
Okay.
So we're a very touchy-feely brand, and so we wanted somebody that could grow people, because we have a saying that it's the people that makes the chicken. It's all about people in Nando's. So we wanted somebody who could do that. So a people person. We wanted somebody who had managed multi-chain units,
Okay.
multi-unit chains as such. So in the end, we actually got somebody from the pharmaceutical chemist who had run chemists as such.
Okay.
So like the Watsons and all that, right? So that was the person that we brought in.
And how did it fare after some time?
It was okay. Bramal took him in the end.
Wow.
He must be very,
He was
very
one.
good.
He was
Yeah.
one. He was one of the guys that Bramal
sorry.
invested in. But
Okay.
but what I found, so my learnings from that was, because I had never managed a CEO before, I
Okay.
stepped back completely, and that was my mistake.
What does completely mean?
So even though I still went into the office, even though I still, he was my direct report, I didn't scrutinize as much as I should have done. We didn't have the structure. I think we even had a board then, but somehow
You didn't go in detail.
in detail as much. And that was my biggest learning. So, and then that particular time as well, the group was chasing numbers in terms of new restaurants. So this guy, because he had run so many restaurants before, he said, no problem, I'll grow you 13 restaurants a year. Now, we were at 50. To grow 13 is quite a substantial growth,
20%.
right? Now, the one thing about growth and expansion is you need to make sure you got the pipeline of people in place. And he was taking all our best people from our existing restaurants and putting it into the new restaurants. And that left all the very junior people.
Oh.
And so we started seeing negative like-for-likes happening in all those existing restaurants. And before you knew it, we were getting negative.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
a year and a half after that, he left us, and I was left with a business that was trading negatively like-for-like. So I had to step back in again for 9 months.
You were mentioning the fact that you hired a CEO, and after about a year and a half, he left, and then you had to come back for 9 months. So, what was the change? 9 months is a short time, right? So you had a CEO that was there for a year and a half, and then 9 months later, from you coming back in, you left again, which I presume was to hire another CEO, right? So what happened in those 9 months?
Yeah. So when I stepped back in, as I said to you, the like-for-like restaurants sales was down by about minus 16%.
That's quite a bit, yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's so people always think that they always look at total sales, but if you're building new restaurants, you're investing money into it. Whereas if you look at your existing restaurants and you grow the like-for-like, the year-on-year sales, you're actually just milking the assets of every single restaurant, right? So we really, the one thing I had to do was really just get this moving again. So how do you push everybody to grow the sales again? And I drove a very good incentive scheme. I basically went in there and I said, okay, right, guys, we really need to turn around the business. We've got to do this together. So I had 13 areas as such, and 13 area managers, or what we call business managers.
Okay.
And normally when you do incentive schemes, they always like to do the top 3. But let's say you had, I can't remember how many restaurants. So we had open 20. We probably also had about 70 over restaurants at that time. If you had given just the top 3, the bottom 70 restaurants don't care because they already, there's no chance for me to win anything. I'm not going to do anything, right?
Yeah, correct.
So what I did was I said to them, I'm going to break it down to 13 areas. Each area manager has a chance to win, each group has a chance to win a trip to South Africa. And I got working together with South Africa and arranged a trip for them there. I tell you what, in 9 months, it turned around 16%. It just goes to show when people want to drive their business, they can really do it.
Just need an incentive to do it,
You just
right?
need an incentive and a reason to do it as well.
So did you fly everybody to South Africa
We
then?
did. The next day we flew the 13 people.
The
lah.
13 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All 13 qualified.
Yeah. Well, because there's a winner in every single area, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah,
we
true
got
then.
them through. And just put a few pieces together. I think the other thing I realized in managing this CEO and that stepping back was a lot of people I'm finding when they come into a company, they want to change everything, even if things are going well or you've put things in place. And they managed to dismantle years of learning, years of SOPs and everything else, and they wanted to put new things. But because I think things to change so quickly after 1.5 years, they didn't have time to establish those, right? So you want to change a program, that's fine. Make sure you execute it well. But they changed it, but they never really ran another program as such and made it live in the business. So it was like starting afresh again. So when I finally found this next CEO, I made sure I held his hands for a year. I was there all the time, making sure that he assimilated into the Nando's culture.
Lesson learned, right?
Yeah. It was really quite.
But it's a very, very fine balance between holding the CEO's hand and feeling like you're micromanaging him.
Yes. So I had to make sure I didn't do that. And that's why at that particular point, I also joined YPO.
Yeah, that's a fine line there, actually. How do you actually manage that?
So I had to make sure that even though I spoke to him, I think we had a board. And then we also had our monthly meeting between my partners and me.
Okay.
And we're quite good. The two of us are very clear in what we want out of the business, right? And we're very, very aligned. So we had to make sure that he just checked in with us every 2 weeks or 4 weeks,
Okay.
and he was able to run on his own.
Okay.
And he was allowed to have his own space to do what he wanted. So our decision was just more on him, and that was it. I mean, our discussions were with him, and
So
that's
those
it.
check-ins were more of high-level stuff.
It was. I mean, he would present what he's going to be doing, and we would like maybe give a comment, and then that's it, right? He was allowed to be able to do it, or he was able to give us his feedback of what he wanted.
Okay.
But I have got to say, stepping back as an entrepreneur, it's been extremely hard in how do you drive sales in a business through one person.
Right.
It's extremely, extremely hard. And that's why I'm saying I joined YPO for this reason. So when I was in EO, we're all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But in YPO, I suddenly had like CEOs in my forum, and they were able to share with me what they look for, how they wanted the support, what is it that they look for in terms of directions and things like that. And so I was able to get like a bit of a sounding ground from that.
But that's interesting, right? So
Yeah.
it's a totally different perspective.
It's very different.
Not among entrepreneurs, but among fellow CEOs, and everybody starts to share their own stuff and
Yeah.
how you do things, and yeah.
Which is
Because
interesting.
whoever teaches us how to step back.
Especially, yeah, nobody, right? So
And you go from learning from your peers to then being able to then give back to Endeavour as a mentor, which you've been here for 8-9 years now. We've been looking at how long you've been with
Yeah.
us. And I think the key learnings is the fact that you have built a business at scale already. Let's be honest. It's a business that's been running for now, 25 years?
Yeah, 26.
26 years?
yeah,
And then you are now speaking to entrepreneurs that are trying to scale a business, some as young as a couple of years old, some, 5-6 years. Very few who have spoken to you that has 25 years experience, right?
Correct.
In your experience as an Endeavour mentor. Going through your journey now that you've been 8-9 years, you've met probably, 50, 60 individuals across these
Mentees,
years,
yeah,
mentees. Have you ever found, and you've met some FMB, I assume, over the past
Yes,
9
a lot
years.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you see another version of yourself in any of them? Someone that you say, hey, this person, given the right guidance, given the right inspiration, would potentially become another Nando's or a version of a Nando's that you built, a company that's a household name today.
Yeah, I guess so. The things when they're young, everyone's so ambitious.
And so impressionable too, right?
Impressionable and ambitious. Although sometimes you just kind of think, oh my God, some of them you just need to guide them in the right place. I think the difference between a lot of them and myself I was very lucky to have good partners who were able to help me grow. The other thing was I've always said to them is they need the network.
Yeah.
They need the ability to learn and put processes in places, because actually if you didn't have that, where do you learn?
I think that's the key, right? The
Yeah.
network and the sounding board. I think a lot of entrepreneurs should look at that point of view. I mean, as much as you are knowledgeable and you are running your business via data and stuff like that, the sounding board, and you
Yeah.
can make the final decision, but
Yeah.
that sounding board, just to hear, to validate and stuff is so important. And that's what lacking with many, many people. And hence, that's why in Endeavour, we're having mentors and trying to see and use them as sounding boards and, okay, basically two stuff, right? To either validate or give you a different option or different perspective for how you should look at it.
Yeah, and peer-to-peer support. So I found in EO, the peer-to-peer support was the I was there for a good 15 to 18 years. And basically we were all entrepreneurs who were scared, who were growing our businesses at the same time. You all had the same issues. So
Correct.
how do you share and do that? Because sometimes when you have a mentor or coach, maybe a coach, mentor is not so bad. When
Yeah.
you have a coach pushing you, sometimes it's different. Whereas I just want to know that there's somebody else in the same place, and I'm not the only one who feels stupid today. I'm the only one who cocked up or whatever.
Yeah,
It's because
and
everybody
someone
else
has
was
gone
in it.
through it,
It's all, yeah, exactly.
One unique question about this, right? Maybe in a short way, why mentorship? And how do you? What's your reasoning behind giving back?
To be honest, I remember being asked in EO to mentor somebody who's in food. And I just went, are you mad? Why would I go and mentor another food competitor and teach him
yeah.
whatever?
So
And I think there's a time when you feel you're ready.
Ah,
When you're
okay.
ready to share and
interesting,
you
right?
realize that it's not about you only. and
Correct.
there is a bigger network. So, Endeavor talks about giving back and things like that. Sometimes when you ask somebody very young and who has never been exposed, they're not ready. And suddenly, I think when I stepped back and then I started working with the accelerators, I was on the EO board working with accelerators, and they were all young, right? So they range from that 1 million to 4 million kind of sales. I started working with something called GSEA as well. So it was the Global Student Entrepreneurs. And those were young, like they only had like 200,000 ringgit, 300,000 ringgit, but they were starting businesses in university. And that's when I suddenly realized I've got so much to give. And then through them, I started meeting other F&B, young startups. And I realized that even when you share something,
It's that feel-good feeling, right?
no, they hear it, but everybody executes differently.
Yep.
True.
So even if you share your
Trade
secrets,
secrets.
you will do it differently from me.
Correct.
Unless you're a real copycat and you follow every single thing and you
that's where
copy
I
the
said-
SOPs and everything.
Yeah,
That's
that's what I
different.
said about the sounding board and validating, and end of the day decisions is theirs. It's just that I want to hear a different version of something.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that's how I got into it. So accelerators was the first, and actually it was an Endeavor. It was Tertian who brought me in, right? So he got me as his accountability coach. So I started in accelerators because of him.
Okay.
And then he dragged me over to on Endeavor as well. So, and then I became a mentor here as well.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, looking at overall stuff, and since things has started till today, what are your among these 20, 25, 26 years, any significant event that has a very deep impact in you
In what sense?
in throughout your journey, your business journey? Any particular event that, until today, that you'll always remember something that happened?
I think the realization that every time something good happens, something bad will happen the next year.
That's the Asian mentality,
no,
right?
No, I mean, she's saying based on her experience,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah,
So it's like,
and when I
And it's
say that,
true?
as in,
Wow.
running a business is not smooth all the
Yeah.
time. I think that's what I mean. So we talked about turnaround just now, and I went
Yeah.
and talked about Singapore. But every time I did Singapore, Malaysia would go down. Then I turn back into Malaysia and turn around Malaysia, Singapore goes
It's
down.
house on fire.
And it's non-stop.
Yeah,
I think
it's like-
driving a business is just non-stop.
yeah, and okay, I mean, it's also, I mean, what are your advice there to people to maintain that kind of drive and persistence with this yo-yo kind of style? What do you need in you that, to really keep on persisting and keep on moving on and moving on and moving on? What is that drive? What's your drive?
I think. Look, at the end of it, if you got your money in there, you will definitely need to make
Skin
it
in the game,
succeed, right? You got
basically.
skin in the game, definitely. But I think there's also a passion to do better.
Okay.
If you don't have passion for something, I mean, when I stepped back, I think I was a bit burnt out, and I really, really was ready to step back at that time.
The first time.
That first time, and I just thought, you know what, I need that space, and I needed somebody to bring new energy in there.
Okay.
And I think sometimes you got to realize, when is it time that you need to get new energy, new blood in, and to drive your business, right? Because you only know better. It's your business.
Correct.
But that persistence and making it succeed, I think as an entrepreneur, as a founder,
Mhm.
you will always have that because it's your business. You want it to
True.
succeed.
Okay. I mean, it's been pretty interesting, before we moved on to our next session, we were going to have a short break. And then, well, Adlin, I think it's been, I mean, I didn't expect this, and a lot of great insights and,
No,
well-
I think the one pivotal moment, Chung Lynn, I think I want to have this in the next leg or the final leg of our session is this.
Okay.
Had you brought your dad to a different restaurant,
that's
there would not have been a Nando's.
I don't know, my dad's passionate and loves his steak. I think if I hadn't done that, he would have pushed me to, although I probably might not have come back and done that. He might have,
There you go.
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one moment.
It was timing also.
Yeah.
It was
Alright.
timing. I got my professionals. I think sometimes timing makes a big part of decision. I just finished my professionals. I qualified. I was an architect. I just finished that project. I wasn't getting on so well with my boss at that particular time. And I just thought, when my dad gave me this offer, I was like, why not?
So it's all in one, right? So everything happening
At
it's
one
like
time.
all the stars align for this to
Yeah.
happen. I mean, it's kind of
I mean, if your dad
unique,
liked,
right? Yeah.
he drank the Costa coffee, he liked it, you probably have Costa instead, right? I mean, it could have been anything.
Could
that
have been, yeah.
Yeah, anything, right?
Yeah.
But-
If the
and-
timing was right.
Yeah, and you had to have been disillusioned somewhat with your current job.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the journey of the accidental entrepreneur that became one of Malaysia's biggest household names.
Exactly,
Crazy.
and we're gonna have our final leg very soon, and we're off for a break. And let's finally hear more, right?
Exactly.
263 people in leadership. So you're talking about restaurant managers and
Okay.
everybody in the office and things. 59% are women.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bravo!
So we have a very strong women team. At one point, when I was running the business, before I stepped back, I think I had one male exco. That was it. When you run a business, and I'm sure it's the same with you, Sundar. When
Yeah.
you run a business, you breathe, eat, live
Correct.
the business.
No
Unfortunately, with
matter
mine, I
how much
actually
you
do
go
breathe,
through.
actually eat it as well, right?
Okay.
So
You actually eat
you
it.
can't
yeah.
eat your scaffoldings
Yeah.
and all that, but yeah.
True.
The one thing I learned over the years was you've got to make time and you've got to put it in your diary. If you don't put it in your diary to say, do your workout or, to go for lunches with friends or whatever, you will never do it.
Yeah.
But if you put it in your diary, you actually always will find time. It sounds really weird. You will always find that 1 hour to
Okay.
do your workout.
Okay.
Always have 1 hour for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.